HOA stops black paramedic mid-CPR. Now they're facing a $10 million lawsuit. Get your hands off that boy or I swear I'll cuff you myself. The voice didn't belong to a cop. It came from a man in cargo shorts, a plastic badge clipped to his belt, and a smugness that could fill a stadium. Gerald Hunt, Chief of Security for the West Haven Lakes HOA, a title he gave himself, stood over Jamal Carter, a licensed paramedic in full gear, who was kneeling over a teenage boy in full cardiac arrest. The kid's lips were blue, his chest unmoving. The hum of a portable AED charged in the background, its green light blinking, ready to shock. "I'm saving his life," Jamal barked, sweat pouring from his temple as he pressed deep, rhythmic compressions into the boy's sternum. "This is private property," Gerald snapped, stepping closer. "You're unauthorized. I need you to step away now." Jamal didn't budge. "I'm a licensed paramedic. Off duty, yes, but legally allowed to respond in an emergency. If you stop me and he dies, that's on you." Gerald's eyes narrowed. He reached for his walkie. "We've got a trespasser on Ridge Court Playground. Black male, aggressive, mid-30s, possibly impersonating EMT. Backup requested." At that moment, the AED beeped and advised a shock. Jamal hit the button. The boy's body jolted, then slumped. Come on," Jamal whispered, resuming compressions. Then it happened. Gerald lunged forward, grabbed Jamal by the arm, mid-pump, and yanked him off the boy. "I said, back off. You are under citizen's arrest." No, don't do this," screamed one of the nearby teens who had been watching, phone in hand, recording the whole thing. Jamal fought against Gerald's grip, trying to get back to the boy's side, but it was too late. The rhythm was broken. The shock lost its chance. The chest didn't rise. The AED blinked out. Jamal sat cuffed, face scraped, his hands trembling behind him. The boy, Elijah Thomas, aged 15, lay motionless under a wide blue sky. 6 minutes later, real EMS arrived. Too late. By that evening, the video had 40,000 views on TikTok. By morning, it was on CNN. But 2 hours before the tragedy, it had been just another slow Sunday. Jamal had been visiting his cousin Malik at the West Haven Lakes subdivision, helping him move into his new townhome. It was all manicured lawns, HOA-mandated mailboxes, and community rules so thick they might as well be federal code. Jamal had just dropped a box of pans on the kitchen counter when the first scream pierced the air. "Help! He's not breathing!" Jamal didn't think. He ran, muscle memory taking over before conscious thought. When he hit the playground, he spotted the boy instantly, on the pavement, eyes glassy, lips turning a terrifying shade of gray. "Call 911, Jamal yelled as he dropped to his knees. "Tell them we've got a cardiac arrest, teenage male." He worked fast, moving into chest compressions. 30 down. No pulse, no response. He pulled the AED from his bag, it was never far from him, and began charging the unit. "You're not allowed here," a voice snapped behind him. Jamal ignored it. Then Gerald's voice again, louder, more threatening. "This is private property. You can't treat anyone without HOA authorization." "HOA?" Jamal glanced up. "This kid doesn't care about your HOA. His heart just stopped." Gerald stood his ground, arms folded, eyes hidden behind cheap mirrored shades. "If you don't step away, I'll detain you until police arrive." "That's obstruction of emergency medical response," Jamal warned, "and you're impersonating a first responder." Jamal's breath caught. It wasn't just ignorant, it was dangerous. He'd heard of stories like this, neighbors getting in the way of CPR, bystanders calling the cops on off-duty black EMTs. But this was real. This was happening to him. The boy gasped, barely, and Jamal moved to resume compressions. And then Gerald tackled him. The phone recording captured the exact second. Jamal's body thrown back, the AED flying, the kid twitching, then stilling. "You just killed him," someone whispered. A silence fell. Police arrived 7 minutes too late. They found Jamal on the pavement, wrists red from zip-tie cuffs, his trauma bag splayed out, his ID visible. One officer knelt next to the body. "What the hell happened here?" he asked no one in particular. Jamal didn't speak. He couldn't. Back at Malik's place, the two cousins sat in silence. Jamal's knuckles were raw. His voice barely returned. Malik finally asked, "What's the name of that security guy again?" Jamal didn't blink. "Gerald Hunt, chief of nothing." Malik stared hard. "You need to sue." "I don't want money." "You want justice?" Jamal nodded. "I want them to answer for this." That night, Jamal made a single phone call. A voice on the other end answered. Female, firm, but warm. "Camille Brooks' law office. How can I help you?" "I need to speak to Camille. It's urgent. Tell her it's Jamal Carter." There was a pause, then a shuffle of noise. Then the voice returned. "She's on the line." Camille picked up. "You okay?" she asked. "They cuffed me," Jamal whispered, "while I was doing CPR." Camille's breath caught. "Tell me everything." As Jamal told her what happened, Camille's voice dropped. "We're going after them. All of them." "The HOA?" "No," she said. "The entire system that let that man believe his clipboard gave him the right to play God." Outside the window, West Haven Lakes glowed under porch lights and silence, but the storm was already forming, and they had no idea what was coming. The press conference wasn't supposed to be this big. Camille Brooks had planned for a few cameras, maybe a dozen people. Instead, by noon, the steps of the county courthouse were packed. Journalists jostling for angles, EMTs in uniform standing silently in support, neighbors holding signs that read, "Let him work," and "CPR is not a crime." A teenager held up a printed photo of Elijah Thomas, the boy who died, his basketball jersey now a symbol of everything lost. Jamal stood just off stage, his hands clenched behind his back. He hadn't slept more than an hour since it happened. The image of Elijah's lifeless eyes still haunted him, and Gerald's voice, loud, ignorant, final, echoed every time he closed his eyes. Camille stepped to the podium. Her gray suit caught the wind, but her voice didn't waver. On Sunday, Jamal Carter, a licensed paramedic, responded to a medical emergency. He attempted to save the life of a 15-year-old boy. While performing CPR, he was physically restrained and detained by an untrained, self-appointed HOA security chief named Gerald Hunt. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Camille continued, "The result was catastrophic. The boy died, not because he couldn't have been saved, but because someone thought a badge from a printer gave him the right to stop a trained black professional from doing his job." She paused. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a violation of medical protocol, of civil rights, and of basic human decency. Jamal stepped forward then. The crowd hushed. "I didn't know Elijah," he said, "but I knew he was dying. I knew how to help. I've been doing this for 10 years, on highways, on sidewalks, in alleyways. Never once did someone try to stop me, until Sunday." He swallowed hard. "I was treated like a threat, like I didn't belong, even with my trauma bag beside me, even with the AED in my hands, even as that boy's chest stopped rising." Someone in the back shouted, "You did the right thing." Jamal gave a slow nod. "But doing the right thing got a boy killed, and that should terrify every one of us." Reporters shouted questions, but Camille raised a hand. "There will be time for that. Today is about the facts, and the fact is, The West Haven Lakes HOA, through its policies and lack of oversight, created an environment where ego was more important than emergency. That ends now. By that evening, the story had reached national news. Hashtags like number CPR not a crime and number justice for Elijah trended for hours. EMT forums lit up with messages of support. One paramedic in Ohio wrote, "This could have been me. I've worked scenes where people didn't want me touching their family, but never handcuffs, never that." But inside the West Haven Lakes HOA office, the tone was different. Karen Whitford, HOA president for over 8 years, sat stiffly in her leather chair, staring at the footage playing on her tablet. "He should have waited," she muttered. "Waited for what?" asked Tom Garcia, the board's only Latino member, his tone laced with disbelief. "For permission. The kid was dying." Karen looked up sharply. "We have protocols." "Protocols that kill people?" he snapped. She ignored him and tapped her keyboard. "We'll release a statement. Say it was a misunderstanding. Gerald was following HOA policy. We'll express condolences and let it blow over." Tom stood. "The kid was dead before the ambulance even showed up, and we let Gerald play soldier with someone's life." "I won't tolerate this tone, Tom." "Then you won't tolerate the truth." Tom walked out, slamming the door behind him. Across town, Gerald Hunt sat in his garage, watching himself on the news. Over and over. His arms crossed, jaw clenched. His wife, Vanessa, hovered in the doorway. "You should say something," she murmured. "People are calling you a murderer." "They don't know the law," Gerald said flatly. "He was trespassing. He was trying to save a child." Gerald's face turned red. "I did what I had to do. He didn't follow orders. He disrespected protocol. That's chaos." Vanessa's voice dropped. "You made a choice, Gerald. And now a kid's dead. Do you even hear yourself?" He didn't answer. He just pressed play again. Back at Camille's law office, Jamal sat across from her at a long conference table littered with documents. "We're not just suing the HOA," she told him. "We're naming Gerald personally, civil liability, obstruction of emergency services, maybe more if we get the autopsy report." Jamal rubbed his temples. "Will that bring Elijah back?" "No," she said gently, "but it might stop the next Gerald from doing this to someone else." That night, Jamal received a message. It was from Elijah's mother, Patrice. "I don't know what to say, but I saw the video. I know you tried. Thank you." He stared at the screen for a long time, then typed back, "I should have done more." She replied, "You did more than anyone else even tried." He didn't respond. He just sat in the dark, holding his phone, haunted by a heartbeat that never came back. And somewhere in the depths of West Haven Lakes, the lights stayed on, bright, blinding, and oblivious to the firestorm heading straight for them. Jamal didn't want to be a symbol, but somewhere between the handcuffs and the headlines, he had become one. The following morning, Elijah Thomas's funeral was held at a small church in Southbridge. Jamal almost didn't go. He didn't know the family beyond that brief, heartbreaking moment on the court. He wasn't sure he belonged, but Patrice had reached out again that morning with just 3 words: "Please be there." The chapel was packed. Friends, teachers, basketball teammates. Reporters waited outside, cameras lowered respectfully for now. Inside, the air was thick with incense and sorrow. When Jamal stepped in, people turned. Some whispered. Others just nodded, offering silent recognition. Patrice rose from the front pew and walked toward him, eyes red but determined. "You came," she said. "I wasn't sure I should." "You tried to save my son," she replied. "That makes you family in my book." She led him to the second pew. He sat quietly as a slideshow played above the altar, photos of Elijah laughing, running, holding a trophy. It was the kind of life that deserved a future. Later, as people lined up to speak, one of Elijah's classmates stepped forward, a skinny kid named Travis, voice cracking but clear. Elijah was the fastest guy on the court, smiled even when we lost. He wanted to play for UCLA. He had plans, real ones. And he should be here. His voice faltered. But instead of his name being called for a scholarship, it got printed in headlines because someone thought rules mattered more than breath. Silence. When Jamal stepped outside after the service, a small group of EMTs waited for him. Uniforms, badges, trauma bags slung over shoulders. One of them, a woman named Rochelle with close-cropped curls and steady eyes, held out her hand. "You don't know me, but we've got your back. All of us." "Appreciate it," Jamal said, shaking her hand. She looked over her shoulder. "That's not all. Come with me." Down the block, parked in front of a diner, were 6 ambulances from different counties. More medics stood nearby, holding signs. "Let us save lives. CPR is not trespassing." Paramedics over protocol. A spontaneous walkout. An unannounced protest. No unions, no schedules. Just people who'd seen enough. Across the street, news cameras panned fast. Jamal stared, caught off guard by the weight of it all. Then Rochelle turned to the crowd and spoke. "This is not about one HOA or one kid. It's about a system that sees black uniforms and doesn't trust the training behind them. That handcuffs healing, that punishes care." She turned to Jamal. "You speak or I will." He exhaled slowly, then stepped up onto the curb. "I didn't come here to protest," he said, "but I guess that's what I've become." Laughter rippled lightly through the medics. "I became a paramedic because I wanted to stop death from having the last word. I've held kids who bled out in alleyways. I've cracked ribs doing compressions in the back of moving vans. Never once did I stop and think, do I belong here? Because when someone's dying, you don't ask for permission. You act." He paused, gaze sweeping the crowd. But what happened at West Haven wasn't just an interruption. It was a message that a man with a fake badge could override a decade of experience just because I didn't live behind a gate. Reporters leaned in, cameras zoomed. "And if we don't stop it now, it'll keep happening. Next time, it might not be a basketball court. It might be your street, your kid, and your call for help might go unanswered because someone's worried about neighborhood optics instead of saving a life." Applause broke out, growing louder as bystanders joined in. Across town, HOA President Karen Whitford watched the live stream in horror from her office. Her phone buzzed endlessly. Voicemails from board members, texts from lawyers. A new headline flashed across her desktop. "From rescuer to revolutionary, the paramedic who sparked a movement." Inside her email, a forwarded message from the HOA's insurer read, "Due to potential liability exposure and national attention, coverage for security-related incidents may be subject to immediate review. Recommend immediate PR damage control and legal reevaluation of all related protocols." She cursed under her breath. Meanwhile, Gerald Hunt sat on his porch in a lawn chair, wearing his security vest like a medal. A neighbor approached, hesitant. "Gerald, maybe you should, I don't know, lay low for a bit." He didn't flinch. "I did what was right," Gerald said. "He broke the rules." "You broke a boy," the neighbor muttered and walked off. Later that night, Jamal sat in his apartment, his inbox flooded with messages from EMTs, civil rights attorneys, even a senator's aide. Camille had forwarded a copy of a new petition circulating online. Federal protection for emergency responders from civil interference. It had 86,000 signatures and growing. Jamal clicked open one email at the bottom of the list. It was from a high schooler in Oregon. "Hi. I want to be a paramedic one day. I saw what they did to you, and I just wanted to say, I'd want you there if I ever needed help. He closed his laptop slowly. The fight had started in handcuffs. Now it was burning across the country. By the time Jamal arrived at his brother's office the next morning, the energy in the room was electric. Marcus Warren, civil rights attorney with a reputation for making city governments squirm, stood at the center like a general reviewing war maps. "This is bigger than they think," Marcus said, pinning a printout of an internal HOA email onto a corkboard. "This is systemic negligence masked as community policy." Jamal stood near the doorway, silent, scanning the room. News clippings, HOA bylaws, photos from the incident, screenshots of Gerald Hunt in his security vest, yelling across the basketball court. "Do you want to make this civil, criminal, or both?" Marcus asked, finally turning to him. "I want accountability," Jamal replied. "Whatever gets us there fastest." Marcus nodded. "Then we hit them where it hurts. Policy first, then reputation, then money." He pointed to another email, this one from HOA President Karen Whitford to her board, dated 2 months before the incident. "We must maintain optics during all community events. No outside contractors unless pre-cleared." Marcus tapped the line with a pen. "That's not a policy. That's a boundary against compassion." Jamal crossed his arms. "And it cost Elijah his life." Marcus leaned in. "Then we make sure it costs them their future." Later that afternoon, a press conference was held on the steps of the Southbridge Courthouse. Media vans clogged the street. Cameramen jostled for angles. Local and national news stations stood shoulder to shoulder. Marcus stepped up to the podium, sharp in a dark navy suit, and cleared his throat. "Good afternoon. My name is Marcus Warren, and I represent Mr. Jamal Harris, a licensed paramedic and 10-year emergency responder who was unlawfully detained while administering life-saving CPR to a minor within the West Haven Hills community. Flashbulbs popped. Today we are filing a $10 million lawsuit against the West Haven Hills Homeowners Association for gross negligence, obstruction of emergency medical services, unlawful detainment, and contributing to the wrongful death of Elijah Thomas, a 17-year-old high school student." Gasps. Cameras zoomed. "This is not just about Jamal. This is about every trained medical professional who may one day hesitate because a badge with no authority, no training, and no heart got in their way." When Jamal stepped to the mic, he didn't read from a script. His voice was steady, but his eyes carried weight. "I didn't wake up expecting to lose someone that day. I didn't expect to be handcuffed while trying to save a kid's life. But here we are. And if speaking up now makes sure that never happens to anyone again, then I'll do it every day for the rest of my life." He stepped back. The crowd roared. By nightfall, the lawsuit was trending nationwide. HOA attorneys issued a flat corporate statement. "We are reviewing the matter and committed to community safety." But the internet didn't buy it. On Reddit, a user posted a leaked copy of the HOA's security training materials. The documents included phrases like "assert physical authority" and "challenge all unknown responders." A note in the margin, allegedly written by Gerald, read, "Even licensed workers can be a threat if they don't check in first." The backlash was immediate. Even HOA residents began speaking out. One, a retired ER nurse named Belinda Holt, appeared on a local news segment. "I begged the board to get real training for security years ago," she said, "but they were more interested in enforcing HOA dues and noise complaints. Now a kid is dead." Meanwhile, Jamal's inbox was flooding again. Messages from fellow medics, from firefighters, from mothers. One read, "You were there for him. We're here for you." But not every message was support. An anonymous voicemail came in at midnight. A deep voice, distorted, said, "Stay quiet. You think this helps your people? It just makes things worse. Jamal didn't flinch. He forwarded the message to Marcus and went back to sleep. 2 days later, Marcus called a private meeting at his office. He had a visitor, Linda Charles, a former West Haven HOA board member who had resigned just 6 months earlier. "I saw what happened on TV," she said, sitting across from Jamal. "I used to defend that board. I thought we were doing good work. Then I realized we were building fences instead of bridges." She slid a manila envelope across the table. "These are internal memos, emails, and meeting notes from the last 2 years. You're not just suing a bad policy. You're exposing a culture." Jamal opened the file slowly. One note, dated last spring, read, "No need to involve medics unless risk of lawsuit is high. Image is key." Another read, "Avoid paramedics from outside districts. Unpredictable liability." He looked up at Linda. "Why are you doing this now?" She sighed. "Because I should have done it sooner. And because Elijah could have been my grandson." That night, Marcus prepared a new motion to submit the leaked documents as evidence. The case was evolving fast, from civil rights infringement to full-blown institutional misconduct. And Jamal? He wasn't just a paramedic anymore. He was becoming the face of a reckoning. By the time the leaked documents hit the morning news cycle, West Haven Hills was a community under siege, not by outsiders, but from within. Residents flooded the HOA office with phone calls, demanding answers, while others staged impromptu protests outside the front gate, with signs that read, "Let medics save lives," and "Justice for Elijah." Inside a modest cafe downtown, Jamal sat quietly across from Elijah's parents, Patrice and Darrell Thomas. The cafe was nearly empty except for them, the only sound being the low hum of the refrigerator and the occasional clink of cups behind the counter. Darrell's hands were clasped tightly, knuckles white, eyes staring at the table. Patrice had Elijah's high school photo printed on a button pinned to her blouse. Her voice, when she spoke, was calm but trembling. "You were with him," she said softly. "You saw him." Jamal nodded slowly. "I did everything I could. I swear." Patrice closed her eyes and swallowed. "I believe you, but tell me if there was even a chance." Jamal hesitated, then said the words he knew would never leave her. "Yes, if I'd had a minute more. 2, tops." Darrell let out a sound that was somewhere between a sigh and a grunt of grief. He leaned forward, elbows on the table, finally lifting his eyes to meet Jamal's. "Then help us make sure no other parent has to sit here wondering what could have happened if some jackass hadn't played mall cop." Jamal's throat tightened. "That's the only thing I care about right now." Back at Marcus's office, the legal team was expanding. A prominent former federal prosecutor, Alicia Kemp, had offered to join the case pro bono after seeing the press conference. "This isn't just about a rogue HOA," she said, flipping through the memos Linda had provided. "This is about a power structure that believes it can act without oversight, and it's racial, whether they want to admit it or not." She tapped a highlighted section in one email. "Security officers must remain alert, particularly when non-residents exhibit urban or unverified behavior." Urban. Jamal scoffed when he read that line again. "They mean black," Marcus nodded grimly, "and we're going to make them say it under oath." Meanwhile, the HOA board was fracturing. Karen Whitford, the president, had canceled all public appearances. Gerald Hunt, the man who had cuffed Jamal, was placed on administrative leave, but hadn't been seen in public since. But that didn't stop him from talking. Late one night, a podcast clip started circulating online. It was Gerald, sounding defensive, even arrogant, as he defended his actions on a fringe talk show. Even arrogant, as he defended his actions on a fringe talk show. "That paramedic didn't follow procedure," he said, voice full of bravado. We don't let just anybody walk into our neighborhoods and start poking around. He was aggressive. He resisted. A short silence followed, and then the host asked, "Even if someone's dying," Gerald replied without hesitation. "It's not my job to know who's dying. It's my job to keep the community safe." The internet tore him apart within hours. A side-by-side clip soon went viral. Gerald's quote played over footage of Elijah's motionless body on the court. The fury was immediate. National figures chimed in. News outlets replayed the podcast repeatedly with scathing commentary. And then came the knock at Marcus's door. It was from the office of Congresswoman Denise Waller, who had quietly followed the case. Her legislative director brought a message. "The Congresswoman wants to meet Jamal." "She's drafting a bill, federal protections for emergency responders. She thinks his testimony could move the needle." Jamal blinked, caught off guard. "I'm not a politician," he said again. "You're not supposed to be," Marcus replied. "You're a voice they can't ignore." But before they could even draft a statement, another twist hit. A new whistleblower emerged, a current HOA board member named Peter Carlson. He was the youngest on the board, a tech consultant who had voted against the current security protocols. Peter reached out to Alicia privately, offering emails from a private message board not previously disclosed. One message from Karen read, "Better to delay responders than let liability spiral. If they're real, they'll wait." Another from Gerald was more chilling. "If they don't have credentials on file, treat them like intruders, period. Medics, contractors, pizza delivery, doesn't matter." Peter had screenshots, timestamps, everything. When the materials were verified and submitted to the court, Alicia's hands shook. "This isn't just negligence," she said. "This is policy, racist, codified, intentional." That night, Jamal walked alone through a city park near the hospital. He passed a group of teenagers playing basketball under flickering lights. One of them missed a shot, laughed, and shouted, "You got a block better than that, man." Jamal froze for a second. The sound, the joy, felt like it belonged to another world. But one of the kids turned, saw him, and smiled. "Hey, you that guy on the news? The EMT?" Jamal nodded once. "You tried to save that boy, right?" Jamal's voice was quiet. "I tried." The kid lifted a fist, nodding in respect. "That matters, man. It matters." Jamal walked away with his heart heavier and lighter at the same time. He knew what came next would be harder, but he wasn't backing down. The sun had barely broken through the clouds over West Haven Hills when a black SUV with tinted windows pulled into the HOA's main office parking lot. Out stepped a woman in a crisp navy blue suit, heels sharp enough to pierce concrete. Alicia Kemp, former federal prosecutor, wasn't here for diplomacy. She was here to deliver a subpoena. Inside, the atmosphere felt like the final hour of a crumbling regime. Karen Whitford sat at the head of a long conference table, flanked by 3 visibly shaken board members and 2 panicked attorneys. She clutched a Starbucks cup as if it might shield her from what was coming. "You can't be serious," one of the attorneys said, flipping through the subpoena pages. Alicia's voice was calm, cold. "I'm as serious as Elijah Thomas's death. That's why the Department of Justice has opened a formal inquiry." Karen slammed her cup on the table. "We are a private community. We had protocols." Alicia raised an eyebrow. "Your protocols led to a child's death. That makes them public interest." Meanwhile, back in Marcus's office, Jamal stared at a screen filled with headlines. They were getting louder, sharper. Not just paramedic detained, but racial profiling in gated communities. And "Are HOAs the new police?" The pressure was working, but the weight on his chest hadn't lifted. He looked up as Marcus walked in, holding a thick folder. "Discovery just came through," Marcus said, dropping the folder on the table. "You need to see this." Inside were more emails, dozens, pages of internal HOA correspondence, all retrieved through court order. One message from Gerald to the entire board read, "If we let paramedics just walk in, we'll lose control. I'd rather get sued than let this place turn into chaos." Jamal blinked slowly. He'd rather get sued than let someone live. But that wasn't the worst one. A week before Elijah died, Karen had sent a directive to the board titled Incident Prioritization. It read, in part, "In all emergencies, optics are key. If a responder doesn't match the demographic profile of our residents, additional verification must be prioritized before access." Demographic profile. They put it in writing. Marcus sat down, his voice low. "We're not just winning this case, we're exposing something deep, something ugly." But while their legal arsenal grew, Jamal's emotional toll followed. He barely slept. He jumped every time his phone buzzed. And now, with reporters camping outside his apartment and social media dissecting his every move, the idea of peace felt fictional. That night, he walked to the old basketball court, the same kind Elijah collapsed on. A small memorial had been set up. Photos, flowers, candles. Someone had written in chalk, "He deserved to grow up." Jamal sat on the edge of the court, watching the breeze flicker through the candle flames. A quiet voice startled him. "Mr. Jamal?" He turned. A young boy, maybe 12, stood there with a folded paper in his hands. He held it out with both palms. "I drew this in class." Jamal unfolded the paper. It was a crayon drawing, stick figures, an ambulance, and a big red heart between two people. The caption read, "Thank you for trying." He looked up, throat tight. "What's your name?" "Malik," the boy whispered. "Elijah was my cousin." Jamal knelt beside him. "You okay?" Malik's eyes were wet but steady. "I'm mad. But Mom said when people like you don't give up, it means maybe next time someone will get to go home." Jamal hugged him without thinking. The boy hugged back tightly. Later that week, the national conversation took another turn when a second paramedic, Jacqueline Ford, came forward. She had her own story. Months before Elijah's death, she had been denied entry into another HOA-controlled community just 10 minutes away from West Haven Hills. The reason? Her credentials didn't match the database, even though her ambulance was idling outside the gate with lights flashing. She'd been delayed over 8 minutes. The patient survived, but barely. Her statement, submitted under oath and broadcast on primetime TV, hit like a shockwave. "I'm a licensed paramedic, but in that moment I was treated like a threat. Because I was black. Because I didn't live there. That hesitation could have been a death sentence." More cases followed. A firefighter from Georgia, an EMT in Arizona, all detained, all delayed, all black or Latino. Suddenly, the lawsuit wasn't just about Elijah. It was a mirror held up to the nation. West Haven's local news station ran a panel called The New Redlining, discussing how HOA power structures mirrored systemic discrimination in emergency access. And through it all, Jamal kept showing up. To meetings, to interviews, to court prep sessions, to memorial events. His silence wasn't weakness, it was focus. Because he knew the moment was coming. The courtroom showdown. The place where every second he lost on that court, every breath Elijah didn't get to take, would have to be explained under oath. And he was going to be ready. The courtroom was packed, every seat filled, every corner humming with tension. Cameramen adjusted their tripods, attorneys shuffled through folders, and the gallery buzzed with the quiet murmur of anticipation. At the center of it all sat Jamal Carter, dressed in a tailored gray suit that barely concealed the weight he carried. His eyes scanned the room, not out of nervousness, but precision. Every face here was about to hear what really happened on that court. Across from him sat Karen Whitford and Gerald Price, flanked by their attorneys. Rick Dunlow's seat remained empty. He'd refused to appear, citing bias and media hysteria. No one missed him. Judge Ramsey, a woman known for her no-nonsense demeanor, entered without ceremony and gavelled the court to order. "We're here to hear testimony in the matter of Carter versus West Haven Hills Homeowners Association." The first few hours moved slowly, foundational questions, procedural formalities. But when Jamal took the stand, the atmosphere shifted. The courtroom grew still. "State your full name for the record," the attorney said. "Jamal Anthony Carter." "And your occupation?" "I'm a certified EMT with over 10 years of service." "Walk us through what happened on the morning of April 8th. Jamal breathed in deeply. "I was visiting my cousin. We were helping her move furniture into her new place in West Haven Hills. Around 11:40 a.m., I heard screaming. I ran toward the basketball court. That's where I saw the boy, Elijah, on the ground, not breathing." He recounted everything: the compression count, the AED deployment, the moment Rick approached, the orders to stop. "And did you stop?" "Only when Rick physically restrained me." The prosecution's attorney leaned in. "What did you think was happening to Elijah at that moment?" Jamal's jaw tightened. "He was dying. Every second counted." "And what did you say to Rick?" "I told him I was licensed. I showed him my ID. I told him the kid's life was at risk." "Did he listen?" "Number he said I wasn't authorized to be there. Called it private property. Said I was a liability." A low ripple moved through the courtroom. Judge Ramsey rapped her gavel once. "Let's keep the room in order." The prosecutor continued. "Did Elijah survive?" "No," Jamal said, voice quiet. "He flatlined while I was handcuffed." Silence fell again. The attorney let it breathe. Then she said, "Jamal, how has this affected your life?" He took a long pause. "I've delivered babies in the back of ambulances. I've restarted hearts on highway shoulders. I've been cussed out, puked on, cried on. But I've never had to stand by and watch a child die because someone thought my skin color didn't belong next to a bleeding body." From the gallery, a soft sniffle broke the quiet. Elijah's mother, Patrice, sat with her husband, holding his hand tight. Jamal's words hit home. Then came the defense. Karen's attorney stood, straightened his blazer, and began, "Mr. Carter, were you employed by the city during this emergency?" Number Y was off duty, but licensed. "And you didn't have prior clearance to provide services on private property?" "I had a dying child." "Please answer the question." "No, I didn't have prior clearance." The attorney glanced toward the jury, planting the seed. "So, technically, you were trespassing." Jamal looked directly at him. "Is that what we're calling CPR now?" A beat of silence, then the attorney moved on. "Did you shout at Mr. Dunlow? Threaten him?" "I shouted because he was stopping CPR. I didn't threaten anyone." "Did you continue touching the child after being told to stop?" "I continued CPR. That's not touching. That's saving." The defense tried to rattle him, but Jamal didn't budge. His calm, grounded responses landed harder than any rehearsed rebuttal. It was clear to everyone, this wasn't a man with a grudge. This was a man with purpose. Then came the twist. The prosecution called a surprise witness. Lena Wallace. A former HOA security volunteer, Lena had resigned 3 months prior. She walked into the courtroom with a small box under one arm and a look of resolve on her face. "Miss Wallace," the prosecutor asked, "what is in that box?" "Copies," she replied, "of training materials, emails, a binder that Rick made us use during response drills." The prosecutor held up one document. "Can you read what's highlighted?" Lena nodded. "It says, If the person rendering aid is not a resident or previously registered with the HOA, initiate removal protocol immediately. Do not assume credentials are valid. Authority rests with the HOA. The courtroom erupted. Reporters clicked faster. Judge Ramsey had to gavel twice. Lena continued. Rick told us, word for word, sometimes it's better to take control and deal with the fallout later. These outsiders think they can just come in and play hero? Not here. That sentence hung in the air like smoke. The prosecution rested their case. Over at the defense table, Karen stared down, jaw clenched. Gerald's face was pale. Even their own attorney looked shaken. After court adjourned, Jamal stepped outside into a wall of flashing cameras. "Do you feel like justice is close?" a reporter asked. He paused. "It's not just about justice. It's about making sure Elijah's name changes the system that let him die." He didn't smile. He didn't celebrate. But in his eyes, for the first time, there was something solid, like the quiet before a verdict. The verdict came down just after noon on a Tuesday, under skies so blue it felt surreal. The courtroom was still, breath held in collective anticipation, as Judge Ramsey returned from deliberation with the jury's decision sealed in her hand. "Guilty on all civil counts," she announced, voice steady. "The court awards $10 million in damages to Mr. Jamal Carter, including punitive penalties for obstruction, emotional distress, and wrongful detainment. The HOA of West Haven Hills is hereby ordered to dissolve its current private enforcement operations effective immediately, and may not reinstate them without government certification and oversight." No one moved. Then a gasp from the gallery, a quiet sob from Elijah's mother, and finally a wave of relief that washed across the courtroom like a tide. Karen Whitford sat frozen in her chair, her face blank, drained of every ounce of righteous authority she had wielded. Her attorney whispered something, but she didn't respond. Gerald Price put his head in his hands. The two of them, once towering figures in their gated world, were now names in a cautionary tale. Jamal didn't smile. He didn't cheer. He stood slowly, looked toward Elijah's parents in the gallery, and nodded once. Patrice nodded back, eyes filled with tears, hand clutched over her heart. Outside, the media swarmed. Cameras, mics, flashing bulbs. Jamal stepped to the microphones, flanked by his attorney, his cousin, and a quiet group of EMTs wearing black armbands with Elijah's initials. "What does this victory mean to you?" someone shouted. Jamal took a moment, then answered with calm resolve. "This isn't just a win for me. This is a message to every private community, every neighborhood committee, every self-appointed enforcer that life comes before liability. That when a child is dying, you don't ask for an address. You ask, 'How can I help?'" He let the silence sit for a moment before continuing. "This lawsuit was never about money. It was about truth. About a system that decided control mattered more than breath. Elijah Miller died not because help wasn't there, but because help was handcuffed. And we should all be ashamed of that." The crowd erupted into applause, but Jamal stepped back, hands folded, gaze steady. His job wasn't done, not really. A few days later, the fallout began to spread. Karen resigned from the HOA board, effective immediately, issuing a shallow apology in a statement that barely reached the local paper. Her home went up for sale less than 24 hours later. Online forums filled with bitter debates. Gerald moved out under the cover of night. Rick Dunlow, who had avoided every subpoena and hearing, was finally arrested after being found hiding in a cabin in upstate Georgia. The charges: impersonating a law enforcement officer, obstruction of emergency services, and reckless endangerment. The state legislature announced it was reviewing policies related to private security operations in residential communities. A new bill began circulating, unofficially called Elijah's Law, drafted to prohibit any untrained individual from interfering with emergency response efforts under penalty of prosecution. And Jamal, he went back to work. It wasn't easy. The first day back on the ambulance felt like stepping onto a battlefield, but it was his purpose, and more than ever, he knew why he did it. He also launched a new initiative, the Elijah Project, aimed at providing CPR training in underfunded neighborhoods and educating citizens about their rights in medical emergencies. Within weeks, cities across the state signed on. Schools adopted the training. HOAs, even those in denial, were forced to pay attention. And in one quiet moment, as Jamal stood beside Elijah's memorial, a polished plaque now mounted near the basketball court where it all happened, he felt something shift. A young boy ran up to the plaque, staring at it with wide eyes, then turned to Jamal. "Are you the guy who tried to save him?" Jamal nodded. "My mom says you're a hero." He crouched beside the kid, meeting his gaze. "I'm not a hero. I'm just someone who refused to watch another kid die because of a rule." The boy thought for a moment, then asked, "If I ever need help, will someone like you be there?" Jamal's voice softened. "I'll make sure of it. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Your support helps us keep telling stories that matter, stories that spark change, inspire justice, and remind us that silence is never the answer. Drop a comment below. What part hit you the hardest? Where in the world are you watching from? Your voice matters. Let it be heard.